Welcome, 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 everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. I'm your producer and host of the show, Dr. Lino Martinez. This is your motivational podcast of people's incredible journeys. Oh, yeah, let's do this. Welcome back, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lino Martinez. Today, I would love to welcome Cynthia Muchnick. MA is a graduate of Stanford University and has been working in education for the past 25 years as a former assistant director of college admission, high school teacher, educational consultant, and author of 5 other education-related books. Her essays have appeared on Zibby Owens ZibbyMag, Your Teen Magazine, College Confidential, Raising Teens Today, the Los Angeles Times, and the Mom Experience. I love that title, by the way. She is also an experienced and always learning mother of 3 sons and daughter. Her new book is The Parent Compass, Navigating Your Teens Wellness and Academic Journey in Today's Competitive World. And it is indeed a competitive world. Welcome to the Little Less Fear podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's fun to be here and to connect with you.
Definitely, especially having other California natives. This is really awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Wait, are you a California native, though? You were born here?
I am. I'm like 4th generation, I think. I think I go pretty far back, if that's possible.
Wow. So where that's incredible. Where in California were you born?
I was born kind of in the San Francisco area. My great grandmother was in the 1906 earthquake. I just know that. So, wow. I think maybe that makes my kids 4th generation and me 3rd generation. I don't know. But yeah, I'm definitely a native Californian, but I've lived a lot of places now. And my husband, who's from the Midwest, says most Californians are very focused on thinking this is the best and only place to live. And there's really a lot of other good places out there. So,
and what do you think about that? How do you feel about that?
He proved that to be true. I mean, we lived in New York, Chicago, Florida, different places, Southern California, Northern California, different places to kind of, make sure that we, spread our wings and didn't just get too focused on California. He says New Yorkers are kind of like that too, because they think New York is the only place to live. So go figure.
But you're back in California.
Yes, I am it's now called, I guess, Central California, where I am. I'm in the Carmel, Monterey area right now.
Super beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to A Little Less Fear podcast. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Hey, what brought you to your current passions? Tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are at today.
Sure. Thank you so much. Well, so my background really began as a tour guide in college, where I walked backwards and gave tours to visiting students and visiting parents on my college campus.
Oh,
and
that's fun.
I really enjoyed that job and wanted to figure out a way that I could kind of do that job more permanently. And that led me into my first career in college admissions, which was working for 3 different admissions offices in screening applications, interviewing students, going to college fairs, recruiting, all of that. And it was a really amazing job to have as a young person. There was a lot of travel involved, and I really fell in love with the teenage experience then. I probably didn't appreciate it when I was going through it, but in all the work I did, I was working with high school students, and I just felt like they got such a bad rap as adolescents. And I just found them to be fascinating and interesting and really powerful young adults. So that led me into randomly becoming an author, which I never really thought I would be. But my first book came out in 1996, probably. You were just little at that time.
Oh yeah. I think I was maybe 16, 17.
Yeah. It was a book on marriage proposals. So my career began writing about marriage proposals and weddings and all of that. But because of my background in college admissions, I also co-authored a book also in 1997 on how to write your college essays. And that became kind of turned into a business. So I ended up being an independent college counselor, like a private college counselor for over 15 years working with teens and tweens, helping them navigate school, culminating in the college admissions process. And that was when I would say I really began to understand that age group intimately, because I had so many kids one-on-one in my office working with me. And anyway, I wrote books on study skills. I wrote books on how to, go through your teenage years, and a book on how to survive college. And anyway, then I sort of took a break from writing until 2019, the college admissions scandal hit our headlines. And I had pretty much retired as a college counselor, but I still had colleagues who were doing the work. And I picked up my phone and called my colleague and now co-author Jen Curtis. And the college admissions scandal, if you were hiding under a rock and didn't know about it, but what it really was is also called Operation Varsity Blues, when a group of parents and a very corrupt college counselor was basically cheating students' ways into college by creating what he called a backdoor. So falsifying records of students, creating fake resumes, had a whole cheating piece component on SATs and ACTs where test scores could be manipulated, and created just these kind of false applicants, also through the athletic angle, pretending kids were varsity athletes in sports that they weren't. And many very affluent people went to jail because of this, including this college admissions counselor who was kind of the mastermind behind it. So I called my colleague Jen, and the two of us were just flabbergasted. And both of us decided we needed to do something to calm parents down and kind of re-educate the public on the best way to behave in the journey when you're navigating kind of the college journey with your teens and, and kind of adolescence. So originally the Parent Compass was written as kind of an etiquette book, like how to behave as a parent. And what I love about the title of your podcast, A Little Less Fear, is that in order to embrace your parent compass, which we're going to get to talk about today, you have to be very brave, because it requires parents to do things that are very counterintuitive and that are often pretty uncomfortable and not what the norm and the people around them in a frenzy are typically doing. So the book had two goals, which we think we've met. One was to preserve the mental health of teens, because this is just a world that they're growing up in that is impossibly painful and challenging and competitive and intense. And we see all our headlines being splashed with the mental health crisis that our kids are living in. And the second was to try to preserve the parent-teen relationship, because ultimately when your kids leave home to either go to college or to work or to just go out into the world, because college may not be everyone's path,
right?
You still want to have a relationship with them that's not fractured. So how do you retain that relationship? So throughout the book, we kept addressing that question, and we provided, we think, this parent compass and this toolbox for parents on how to achieve both of those things. So that's really how the book came to being and how I sort of got to, I guess, where I am. I'm also a mother of four, as you mentioned. So I have a 25, 22, 18, and 17-year-old. And so I've sort of been through the trenches as a parent of tweens and teens. So I can put on my mom hat. I can put on my college counseling hat. I can put on my teacher hat. I taught high school for a while. So it's really been, just my passion and my love and my joy to kind of parent and work with kids in this age group.
Before we talk about the Parent Compass, curious to know if your literature and your research methods changed when you became a mother, when your children became teenagers, versus when they weren't teenagers and you actually didn't have your feet wet.
Yeah, that's such a great question. No one has ever asked me that.
Oh, okay, good.
And what I love about that question is I remember our first pediatrician, and I brought in my little toddler, to this pediatrician, and he didn't have any kids himself. And I thought, that's interesting. You're working with all these little people,
right?
And I'm a little bit ahead of you as a parent. Sure. And then as the years went on and we stayed with his pediatrician for many years, he ended up growing his family, becoming a parent. And I remember him saying to me, I wish I knew some of these things because it would have informed my work so much
Sure,
more. And
exactly.
what I think happened in working with teens is I hope my kids will say it made me more empathetic and more understanding when my own kids were going to the journey. What it didn't do though was it still didn't prepare me for all the mistakes I would make anyway, right?
Sure.
Because we're all human, and each of our kids comes out very differently with different communication styles and different
Exactly.
study skills and different, academic interests or their own interests. Are all just little, humans with all these differences. And so a lot of times things that might have worked for one child just don't work for another. And so I would say it's a lot of trial and error. I was very lucky to find a great partner in the journey. My husband and I just celebrated our 29th anniversary.
Oh,
We met in
congratulations.
college. Yeah, we met
Wow,
in
that's
college, and
beautiful.
he has rolled up his sleeves and been a full co-parent with every one of our kids, oftentimes much better than the way I could have done things. So I think we complement each other pretty well.
Oh, that's
And I think the key is really to admitting the mistakes that we have made. And in the Parent Compass, both my co-author and I do come forward and say, look, we are giving you this plan, but we've also made mistakes. And if you're a parent of many kids listening to this, I think you'll know that you often parent your first or second or third kind of differently based on the experience you gain. And, while no two are ever alike, you can sometimes pull from those tools, but it's really hard when there's a curveball. Like I've gone through things with my fourth child that I didn't go through with any of her older siblings. And I feel hopeless and helpless a lot of times and have to turn to my village of other like-minded parents and say, like, I need some advice here, or I'm stuck, or help me. Why is this, why are we clashing? And how can I do better? So I think we're always struggling with that as parents, or as surrogate parents, or as,
exactly.
aunts and uncles, or just caretakers, because, not every family has two parents and, all those kinds of things. So they all look really different, but I think it's a really interesting question. And I hope it made me more informed, and a little better prepared. But until it's your own, piece of your heart that's walking around in another body, it still feels really different. So I don't know. I mean, I think that love and that connection is so fierce of wanting to protect your child, whether it's your biological child or not. But I'm just saying, because you're the parent of that child, there's this connection that is very, very fierce and protective. And that's where we can sometimes make a lot of mistakes, because I think we're just blinded by that love. And oftentimes the things we do to show that love are actually not the greatest choices for our teens, even if we think they might be.
Right.
So.
Do you feel, thanks for sharing that, by the way. That's incredible. I was able to picture it all. That's really beautiful. Thank you. So I'm feeling that the Parent Compass book came at the right time after you now had your feet wet with 4 children, teens, and some now in their young adulthood. This book came at the right time. Had you written it 10 years ago, you wouldn't have had the same ingredients that you have in it now.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a good question, because my co-author, Jen, has smaller kids. So when she was writing the book, she had, 3 and 5-year-old, and now they're, 6 and 9, or, a few years older. And I would say Jen has the benefit of the book and the research that we did for the book to kind of probably avoid some of those mistakes that you make when your kids are really little. But she also had a career of working with teens all those years, just like I did before she had teens of her own. So it is an interesting question. It's kind of like just almost anything in life. When you haven't been through it and you're helping people who are going through it, you're informed maybe in an academic way, in a way you've learned by studying it, but not necessarily by living it. Exactly. And I just think that is a really interesting question to ask, really, in kind of almost anything, because we can't really genuinely stand inside someone else's shoes. We can try, but we can't always just get in there and feel exactly that, because that's not our path, or it's not our journey. It's not our body.
Exactly. You mentioned the word mistakes in parenting a few times. I'm wondering, could you give an example of some of these mistakes? Because from my understanding of just making mistakes as a human being is that there are no mistakes. So they're just clarifying answers, clarifying things, there's clarifying situations. So what constitutes a parental mistake in your journey and in your understanding as a parent
Yeah,
and a writer?
it's a great question. I mean, we talk in the book about how important failure is, right? I mean, people have written books on failure and how they've studied how important it is for us to feel that feeling of making those mistakes or of failing in something so that we can come out the other side of it and learn and become resilient from the failure. And so one of the mistakes we might make as parents is to try to bubble wrap our kids and protect them from the pain and the injury and the failure and the mistakes. So we think we're kind of smoothing the path for them. So there's all these terms like helicopter parent, snowplow parent, tiger parent, overprotective parent. They all kind of share some of these same, types of parenting styles. There's even militaristic parent. That's another one we've heard. But I guess in thinking about kind of mistakes, every day there are so many decisions all of us have to make as parents, and there's a lot of gray areas. So you could read every parenting book out there, you could listen to every podcast, but until you're in that moment and making that split-second decision on how to address that particular situation, it's really hard. And we talk in the book a lot about, and I'll get to that mistake thing, but about looking backwards in order to look forward. So the first chapter of the book requires the parent to really do a deep dive to self-examine what our own biases are, what our own background was, how we were parented when we were kids, and what baggage we bring to the table. And you almost kind of like the plumber with the broken toilet, like you can't help fix your kids or do a good job parenting with your kids until you kind of have fixed yourself. And that's pretty hard to do. And Jen and I had finished the entire book and we had not written that chapter, and it was a glaring omission. So we went back to the very beginning and said, we need to write a chapter where these parents can first together, like if you're parenting with a partner or even on your own, can deep dive and self-explore. But the mistake component, there are so many for everything we do right. I'm sure we do a lot of things wrong too. Mistake for me that I talk about in the book is probably, a pretty big addiction I had to technology for a while that kind of flares up from time to time. And I think COVID probably made that worse, but made it better in some ways too, because as you and I are doing today on the podcast, technology connects us in so many amazing ways. And technology gets a really bad rap when it comes to teens because of the way, it's portrayed that teens are manipulated through technology, or they have, body image issues through it, or they're following these dangerous TikTok fads or whatever it might be. But there's a lot of great things that come with technology too. But my technology addiction was a bit more of like being distracted, being on my computer, being on my social media, and using the excuse that I was doing it for my work and all of that. And my then probably 13-year-old daughter had to kind of pull me off of the computer and put her hand on my body and say, Mom, I need to talk to you right now. I need you to shut everything down. And it was my daughter who got me to look at in my phone, because she had learned in her health class to examine how much time you're spending on all these various applications.
Wow, she put you in check.
So she put me in check. And that is a great way for us as parents to definitely learn and to definitely grow. And thank goodness my kids don't have some of the technology problems that their mom has. So I did not set up a great model there. In terms of that, I would say I've improved, but we can go down rabbit holes from time to time as well. So we're probably all guilty of it in some way, shape, or form. But other mistakes that are really obvious are the mistakes of speaking for your child. Ordering food for your child, telling the doctor what your child needs, like taking their voice away from all the ways that they can self-advocate. And we need them to learn that skill starting at a very young age. So Jen will talk about, watching her kids tie their shoes and just wanting to tie them because it's much quicker. But if you let your kids struggle and struggle and struggle until they tie their shoes, then eventually they're going to be able to tie their shoes more quickly as they get out the door. So it's those kinds of mistakes, I think. And then it's even harder later when they forget their homework or when they need something in the middle of the school day and we want to rescue them. But actually by rescuing them, they kind of don't learn the feeling of how awful it feels to not have the thing they left behind or to have forgotten the form or the deadline or whatever it is. And So while we want to save them by saving them all the time, they don't then learn the message of, uh-oh, I need to plan a little better, or I need to figure out another way to, or I need to confront my teacher and say I made a mistake. And then you learn, you got the consequences of the mistake. And then the next time you won't make the mistake. I mean, we kind of know that the first time our kids forget their lunch, right? They somehow figure out how to get snacks from other kids and maybe ask a teacher for an extra apple. And they come home really hungry. And the next day they don't forget their lunch, you know?
Exactly.
So
I love how you said that. Don't speak up for your child, because if you're constantly speaking up for your children, they're not learning individuality, autonomy, and even confidence. It takes their confidence away as young adults. As they get older, the more that you are, or people are constantly rescuing their children.
Yeah.
And so in doing so, but I'm wondering also if you've seen a change in generations. Because I mean, I grew up pretty, and I'm thinking it's a lot of kids from the 80s where their parents were just working so much, and kids were kind of like, well, why my mom isn't around? I guess I'm just going to make a TV dinner, and I guess I'm just stuck taking care of myself. And then generations seem to have changed where parents became overprotective with their children and doing everything for them, and they fall and scrape a knee, and all of a sudden they're not allowed to ever be hurt or get hurt again. And so when they finally become older and they start going through other types of pains, they are unable to navigate through these pains because they've been rescued so many times all along. And I'm wondering how that impacted your book now, and if you've had any time to reflect on what it would have been like to write a book the way that you wrote now, had it been even 10 years ago.
Yeah, that is, again, your questions are really, really thought-provoking and thoughtful. And what I would say is, yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why we need to kind of take a big step back and self-examine what it was like a generation ago, because even 10 years ago, not even a full generation, you're right. Obviously the introduction of social media, or when it comes to students. So I talk about this a lot when I'm giving college counseling presentations, but in the 1990s, colleges began to brand themselves. They hired PR firms to create, a brand to market their colleges through the materials that they put out and through freebies they sent to students. And in the promotion that they did, I mean, they were basically doing, public relations and publicity. And that makes sense in a way, because colleges are businesses, so they need to fill their classes, right? Yeah. And we're not just talking about, the top 10 colleges on some magical list, but strangely, around that same time, the U.S. News and World Report did come out and started ranking colleges. So there was this sense of urgency that there's special places your kids must go in order to be happy, and that there's, colleges are getting numerically, ranked in order of how terrific they are. And what we talk about a lot in the Parent Compass, we have a whole chapter dedicated to the rankings, is how flawed they actually are and can be, and how we've become this generation that's what, we are calling, competitive parents, that the parents are looking at their kids like this direct reflection on them. And there are these little, trophies that they want to kind of hold up. And that also expressed itself in kids sports and youth sports, which you used to be able to just play in your community center after school, or at the Boys and Girls Club, or in PE. And then maybe you'd join an after school sport, and you could join 1, 2, or 3, depending on what season it was. Well, now if your kid wants to do a sport, it's like the parents feel that the kids have to commit all year long to that one sport. They have to specialize in order to somehow maybe miraculously get some scholarship. And so we explored, how does the NC2A really work, and what percentage of kids are really getting these scholarships that these parents think are everywhere to be had, and they're just not. And so kids are being robbed of a lot of their childhoods now because of specialization. And physically, there have been studies done that doctors are operating now, orthopedists are operating on more and more like 12 and 13-year-olds that need knee replacements. I mean, 10 years ago, that was like the, one young kid with needing, their knee fixed was like all the doctors would come in and watch. Now it's sort of par for the course, because these kids are putting so much abuse and repetitive motion on their bodies at such a young age to kind of in some way sort of get ahead. And I don't think all the kids are necessarily happy with their sport. Like a lot of them just liked playing in the community sports or the pickup games. So a lot of the fun, I think, has been taken out of childhood as parents have tried to insert themselves in this very calculated way. And there's this fear that if you don't for your kid, they're going to somehow be behind. I mean, you could say that with the parenting books too. I mean, the very young parenting books that will say your kid should be doing X, Y, and Z by this age. And if your kid's not, you feel like, oh my gosh, like, what did I do wrong? Do I need help? Do I need a therapist or a tutor or, whatever it might be? So I think it really is, 10 years ago, I would say it was still similar to how it is now. I'd say it's maybe gotten, we would have thought COVID could have done a really great reset to kind of bring us back to what's really important. And in some ways it did, but in other ways, I think now is this more frantic sense of needing to catch up, which is why you mentioned before, the Parent Compass is still kind of an evergreen title. It's really a constant reminder to parents to kind of do what doesn't feel natural, which is to pull back a little bit more and let our kids kind of take the lead.
I love that. So pull back a little more and let the kids take some of the lead, because it is and this is where the mistake, going back to the mistake questions, the mistake, if you want, we could put that in quotes, that parents are making is that they're not pulling back. And in not pulling back, it's becoming really strenuous for the kids and even causing physical exertion to the point where they're just, and you're right. I mean, if kids are just constantly physically exerting themselves because the parent isn't pulling back and they have their own idea on how to catch up and how to keeping up, and listening to other literature, reading other literature that's online, rather than tailor making the information for your specific child, it's going to cause stress on both ends. And it's also going to cause a burnout on both ends. And it's going to cut off communication. Wow.
And then where does it end, right? Where does it end? Like, what are you left with, right? So I always try to tell parents, you had your turn to be a teen. You got to, whatever that looked like in your world, in your life. And in a lot of ways, it was your parents would say, like, you'd go bike to the park or bike to the shopping mall, and they'd say, come home before dark, right? Yeah. So you would or they'd holler outside for dinner and you'd be hanging out with your neighbors or whatever it is. It's just, that's not our world anymore. And the idea of even family dinners is really tricky to pull together because you have kids with different schedules and competing interests and different times of homework and after school activities, and one parent working full time or both parents working full time, and, latchkey kids coming home to an empty house, whatever it might be. And when you said a generation ago, I mean, that is really more what it was. It was more, you would come home and, like, sometimes after school, you wouldn't have hours and hours of activities, but you'd come home and dinner would be there for you to heat up sometimes as a kid until mom or dad got home from work.
Right.
And you would just do your homework and play with your neighbor and maybe watch an after school special. Do you remember those on TV? You just like turn on a show.
Definitely.
So it's just not that way anymore. And these poor kids, I mean, it's such a grind. And no wonder the mental health is breaking down, in this country for these poor kids. So I think the Parent Compass, does remind us to kind of take a pause, take a beat. We want to show our love to our kids by doing, like, if we do more for them, we're showing them how much we love them. But actually, one of the best gifts we can give them is to listen and to really see them and hear what excites them, and not project our sort of vicarious desires onto their lives. Because again, we had our turn, so now it's their turn. And to feel like it's okay when they make those mistakes, we're giving them a gift by letting them have mistakes. I mean, Wendy Mogul wrote a book 20 years ago called Blessings of a Skin Knee and Blessings of a B-. And she went deep into both of those topics. I think they're great. They're great book titles. And she really looked at all the data on how important it is for our kids to, get a little scraped up and get a bad grade here and there, and know how to be able to recover from that.
As you're saying that, one word that came to me, and I don't know how you feel about it, but it's an old school term, the word grit. I feel that that's something that's not common these days at all. And that there was a sense of perseverance when grit was allowed. And I'm just wondering if, the movements, is different types of movements, or even the fear of being an abusive parent, or what constitutes an abusive parent, and is grit considered abuse? I feel that a lot of these situations that happened in the past kind of changed the direction as well. And now parents are stuck with what is too much and what's not enough, and what is also detrimental to the child's individuation. I feel like it's just such a huge domino effect on how it all kind of got mixed up to where it's at now. But I also see, and I'm speaking on behalf of my cousin's kids. They have young teenagers, 14, 13, how also advanced in a lot of ways these kids are than I even was when I was a teenager. They're epic with troubleshooting. And
Yeah.
I mean, this Generation Z, which is ages 11 to 26, I mean, they're in a whole other level, and in so many other ways more advanced than we are. And sometimes I wonder, what type of parents will they make in the future?
Yeah.
And what have they learned from our current generation's quote unquote mistakes, and how will they parent their children?
Well, you know what? Maybe we'll talk in 20 years on the little less fear. Maybe it'll be called a little more fear by then. But because it is generationally, I mean, these are such like big, interesting global questions. And grit is a word we do. Grit and resilience are two words we talk a lot about in the book. And a lot of research is done by Carol Dweck, for example, who, teaches, the idea that, if kids are going after like a goal, for example, or they're labeled as smart, those kids won't want to take as many risks because they don't want to lose their position or their reputation as being smart. And if kids, are trying to just learn for learning's sake and just enjoy learning, and there's no extrinsic motivation, like it's just they want to learn because it's interesting, not because mom or dad is going to give them money or a gift or a love or whatever in exchange for that, those kids tend to, kind of have more grit and have more resilience. And so we talk a little bit about it. We break it down in kind of layman terms about kids who say, well, I'm just not good at that. I'm not going to do that because I'm not good at that. And Carol Dweck tells them to add the word yet to the end. Is I'm just not good at that yet. And it's just going to take time to get better at that. And maybe you'll never be good at that. But to label ourselves or to label our kids is, is kind of dangerous to do, because really they all grow at different stages. And I mean, gosh, look at what, throw puberty in and, being a freshman boy in high school, you could be, 4'5" or 6'5".
Yeah, that's so true.
Who knows what, like your body, how your body arrives wherever you're getting. So I find this parenting space to be really interesting and fascinating. I mean, I come at it certainly from kind of an academic angle, with kids navigating school and the school environment and the college admission process. So does Jen, but she also has her background in social work. So she brings a lot of the kind of therapist point of view to the book, in terms of goal setting, in terms of being a good listener and being a good question asker of our kids. And all of that. And we turned to thought leaders, experts. We interviewed heads of school. We interviewed, parents along the way and teachers. And a lot of people submitted confidential surveys to us that we were able to incorporate into the book and then we looked at the data, of course, from those who came ahead of us and kind of has studied this. But one thing that's, when we're kind of looking at this globally and saying, gosh, mental health is at just an all-time, high for teenagers, especially teenage girls. What's crazy is that, really even for the first time, these kids are being labeled, even like middle and upper class kids who kind of have a lot of resources and a lot of family support and a lot of parents reading the books and going to the parent education seminars and that are really there and really involved, but they're being labeled as like higher at risk than, some kids in poverty, because the risk for the mental health and the suicide and the pressure and, kids having eating disorders or whatever it might be. And it's crazy because you think, how could kids with so many resources and so much support be labeled as at risk? And that, really had set off kind of a lot of alarms. And then you throw in, the totally kooky parents that have gone overboard and nuts, and everyone knows who they are. They exist everywhere. And the goal for the parent compass is you're not going to be that parent. The parent on the sideline that's screaming at the referee and screaming at the kids, or the parent at back to school night that is monopolizing the conversation and totally embarrassing themselves. And, you just sort of think, oh my God, their poor kid. Right. And at times we've all been that parent. And then we have to catch ourselves. So the goal of the book is to really teach you not to be that parent or how not to be that parent. And, and the very end of the book talks about how brave you need to be to do that. So you need to have a little less fear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I love how that's the goal of the end of the book, to learn how to not to be that parent. And something that you mentioned in the beginning of the interview was for the parent to go deep diving and self-explore themselves as a parent. Is that in the beginning of the book, or is that more towards the middle or the
Yeah,
end?
that's so we created like two questionnaires for the book. One was really like a self-reflective questionnaire that you as the parent or the caregiver can do, and it helps if you also do it with your partner or your spouse, if you're parenting with someone else, to kind of answer these questions for yourself so you can see what kind of angles you're each coming from. And then there's only like 2 pages in the whole book where we ask the teens to participate, and that's with a teen questionnaire. It just takes like 5 minutes. It's like 10 or 12 questions for the kids to answer themselves. And then we ask the parents to just dialogue with their kids about how they're each answering those questions. And we find that it works best when the parent says to their child, usually at a moment of like some brownies or yummy food in front of them, and maybe the tech device put away, to say to their kid, hey, listen, I really want to be a better mom or a better dad or a better caregiver to you. Could you help me with that? And just give me like 5 or 10 minutes of your time.
I
And we just
love that.
do this questionnaire together. And usually when your kid hears you say you want to do better, they're like, what the heck? Yeah, like sign me up. I'll tell you how you can do better. So
Right.
they're
ready.
they're used to hearing how they can do better. So so you sit down together, you each answer these questions, and then you talk about it. And it's really, the people who've given us feedback on it, everyone who tested it said, wow, it's really amazing how this kind of works to open up that communication. And it does let your child really feel seen for kind of who they are and how they communicate. And I think parenting is just one of the hardest and most rewarding jobs. I mean, maybe the hardest and the most rewarding job there is, because I do believe that what you put in, you do get out. I mean, it's hard and it's painful and it's constant. And even when they're 18 and they leave your home, they still, have a part of you, and you still want to be there to have them call you back and help problem solve a little bit and be there. But, it really does, help in the communication department. So that's kind of another good takeaway. We learned from this one professor or one podcaster who's a psychologist, like about a year ago, said to us, the only thing you have left when your kids leave home is your relationship with them. That's kind of, the trophies and the grades and the, photo albums and this and that. I mean, those are all like tangible reminders of what was there, but really the relationship is what's left. And the joke is always, oh, is my kid going to need to go to all this therapy, and tell them what a terrible mother he was. But now, thank goodness, therapy is so accepted and so encouraged that a lot of kids are getting a lot of help in these years, which talk about a stigma. 10 years ago, if you said my kid's therapist suggested this, and you're not saying it in a way that you're revealing your kid, nobody seems surprised that your kid would have a therapist. It's like having another coach or another teacher or someone else to help them. You have a doctor for their body and a doctor for their mind.
And even 10 years ago, mentioning the word therapist for your kid or even yourself had such a bad stigma, like, oh, what's wrong?
That's right. And so did gap year. Do you remember 10 years ago, gap year, like taking a year off between high school and college? Parents would be like, ooh, I wonder what happened, or what. Now people are like, what are you doing for your gap year? That's so cool. Like, what are your plans? That makes sense. You've been working so hard in high school. Take a break for a year and just do something that, you're passionate about, or that's fun, or that's different, or, an internship or whatever it might be, an immersion in another culture, or, who knows? So yeah, it is funny how, generationally, and, you could say to your kids, I mean, we talk about this in the book too, like one really good way to relate to your kids when they're down, when they're really bummed about something, is to come up with a story when you were really bummed as well about something similar, even if it was, in your childhood, and actually secretly, even if you have to kind of make it up, if it didn't really happen. And I'm only saying that because it's not that it shines the light on you, but it lets them know that like, I felt that same way. I know exactly how awful that feels when you have a teacher that just seems so unfair and to pick favorites or whatever. Cause I had Mr. Smith who, I could never crack that nut. And then when he became my, music teacher, as well as my, band teacher, then things changed or whatever it might be. So maybe, you can find something hopeful about it or something good that came out of a bad experience. So I think it's important to have our kids, sometimes they'll roll their eyes and say, I know that was a long time ago and you're ancient and all that. But I think there's also something kind of fun about it. The other thing I really love, we don't write about it in the book, but we did this recently in our home before our son went to college, is we took out the home movies. Just, or you can take out the old photo albums or a baby book if you have one. And, most of these kids, like my oldest two, weren't on digital photos as much as they were still on like printed out photos, and albums. But it's really fun to kind of look back and let them see who they were and how far they've come. And a lot of times they don't remember. They've heard the stories, but they don't remember being in that red wagon when it fell over, or, being at that park when the birthday cake spilled, or, whatever the thing is. And I think it's really neat because it sort of also shows your kids who you were when you were, parenting them so much younger. Right. And everyone always thought they looked great back then. Right. But then we go, what about my hair? And look what I'm wearing. And the kids will say, why did you dress me in that? That's awful.
Yeah, definitely. So to constantly be communicating with your children, connecting with them allows them to open up with you and opens up doors of communication for themselves as well, and enables them to speak up for themselves academically and in the real world.
Yeah, definitely. And another kind of, piece that sort of relates to that, I don't know if I should call you Lino or Dr. Lino, but anyway,
however, I'm both.
but is hooking into what excites our kids. So our kids have really different interests than we do. And even if their interests are scrolling through their phones, go sit next to them and say, show me what you're looking at. Like, what do you like to, what apps do you follow, or what accounts do you follow? And they were like, what? No, don't look at my phone. Yeah. Like, oh no, like, well, show me some of the funny things, or even just sharing funny videos. I sometimes click on things and send funny dog videos to my daughter, and she'll kind of laugh, and, whatever it is that is a way to connect, but also whatever their interests are, to let them know that you're interested to hear about their interests. Again, even if they don't excite you, you should feel like a responsibility to get excited about what excites them, because then they'll feel seen and they'll feel heard. And I have a son who loves fantasy football and loves to talk about the stock market. And I know nothing about football, and I don't really follow the stocks, but I make sure to ask him, how are the stocks doing? And, how's your team player doing? And where are you in the rankings of the fantasy team, or whatever it is? And they'll open up when it's things that they're interested in. And if they get in the car and the first thing you say is, how was school today? We all get the eye roll or the grunt or the one word answer. Yeah. So we took the liberty in the Parent Compass to give you 2 pages, full pages of questions, much better questions than how was school today, to keep the conversations, kind of more engaging and more open and more open-ended, so that the kids can't just say, or yes or no. They have to actually think about an answer.
I just thought of something. What if the parent also shares their day with the kid rather than just, how was your day? And if they stay quiet, well, let me tell you what I did today. What do you think about that? Kind of just to have like a conversation flow rather than just keeping it about them, because a child starts to feel almost attacked in a way. Like, hang on a minute, But
I know.
If you open it up and say, hey, well, this was my day, and guess what? Someone gave me an attitude, but then I told them this, and then now we're all good. So kind of just to keep that open flowing almost like friendships / parents / just, I guess, opening up the doors to just keep the flow of communication. I keep saying that, but that's just what feels right to me.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. We have those table topics on our kitchen table. They're like a box that you can print off questions off the internet, or you can buy, like, there's different themes, sports ones, family ones, whatever. And they're just a box with lots of questions, like, if you could have a superpower, which would it be? Or I like the one, would you rather be the best athlete on the losing team or the worst athlete on the winning team? Just things that you're like, wow, that's kind of an interesting, an interesting question or whatever it might be. But yeah, no, I think it's great to share you too. And, some families do rose and thorn when they have a chance to gather around. I mentioned family dinners earlier, which are really hard to coordinate. And I definitely believe they can be redefined in terms of family dinner can happen with one parent and one kid in the car with the kid eating in the back seat on their way to practice. I mean, that can happen. That can be the time when you have your meal, or it could be at breakfast if they're a morning person and you're trying to get them out the door, or it could happen on the weekend when you can try to get the whole family around a table at the same time for whatever meal it might be. But it's pretty unrealistic to try to get family dinner multiple times a week with the way that the schedules just kind of work out. So we just got to grab it when we can make it happen.
I love this, Cynthia. Cynthia Muchnick, everybody, and the topic of her book, The Parent Compass, Navigating Your Teen's Wellness and Academic Journey in Today's Competitive World. What is the biggest takeaway of this book, and what is something you want the world to know that you feel is important?
Oh, wow. I mean, we got through a lot of stuff today.
I know, we really did.
I mean, I don't want to give the whole book away. I want people to go out and buy The Parent Compass and follow our platform and everything. But I think the biggest takeaway is, I don't think there's one parent on the planet that will tell you, I want to be the parent of the mean kid that's the bully that, isn't nice, this and that. I mean, nobody wants to be that parent. You want to be the parent of the kid that finds what makes them happy and that's a good citizen and that feels good in their skin and is a good person. But honestly, for every kid that's kind of happy or having a good day, there's going to be another one that's going to have a really, bad day or bad month or bad year or whatever.
Right.
But kids, teenagers wake up every morning as a different person. I mean, they really do. I think those hormones and puberty and all of that, each day they are kind of allowed a chance to kind of have a clean slate and reinvent themselves. And it does happen pretty frequently. And I think that if we can give them some space to kind of do that and to grow in that way, and just to know that, these are tough years. And if you can just kind of be shoulder to shoulder and let them know, look, I'm here. I see you. I appreciate you. I'm sorry it's hard. And I'm available when you need me. If they can feel that that they have an adult in their life, sometimes it's not the parent, sometimes it's an aunt or an uncle, sometimes it's a religious leader or a teacher or even an older sibling that is their person. So it hurts as parents when you're not that person, right? But you will be at times, just not every time. And we know that because I know that because I know what my kids call my husband for versus what they call me for versus what they call each other for and call neither of us. But all that being said, I think if our kids can grow up feeling like, look, we want to help them on this journey, find what makes them happy, what makes them tick. And we love them unconditionally, no matter what, no matter how many mistakes, no matter how many choices. I mean, in kindergarten, I got the phone call that my kid got bit by someone and I couldn't believe it. And then the next year I got the phone call that my kid, a different kid, bit someone else. So they bite in kindergarten. Who knew? But it happens. They don't always have the words to communicate. And so when you're on the receiving end of that, you feel mortified. What kid bites? And then when next year, you're on the giving end and you're like, wait, my kid bit. So I think we have to understand until you're in that position, we cannot judge each other as parents. We have to build a community. You have to find a village. And you have to know, that you never know what anyone woke up feeling that day and what their world is like behind their doors, and to just give each other like grace and support the way we give it to our own kids and the way we give it to our parent village. So it's a bigger, longer answer than you probably wanted, but that would be my takeaway from today.
It's an incredible answer. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And thanks for being on A Little Less Fear podcast. It's been an honor connecting with you and getting this incredible knowledge. And I just wish you the best in your kids and your book and everything else that's going on in your life. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Dr. Lino Show, A Little Less Fear podcast. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can do so by sending me an email at alittlelessfear@gmail.com or through an inquiry from my website at www.alittlelessfear.com, where you will always find information on where to get my book. You can get my book on Amazon and Amazon paperback version, Kindle or Kindle Unlimited. And I also create incredible visual video poetry for people that are interested in marketing or even just to send a personal note to anybody or somebody that you might love. So yeah, check it out. I love it. Poetry is my passion, one of my other passions, aside from doing what I do right now, which is giving you all the motivation that you need to keep growing, to keep motivating people, motivating yourself, and to keep expanding. I love you all so much. Have a blessed day and take care. Rock on.